Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Your Highness, Sheikh Khalid bin Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Chairman of the Abu Dhabi Executive Council. Your Highness, Sheikh Maktoum bin Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Deputy Ruler of Dubai, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance. Your Excellency, Mr. José Ramos Horta, President of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste. Your Excellency, Mr. Faure Esozimnag Nasingbe, President of the Republic of Togo. Your Excellency, Mr. Akil Bek Japarov, Chairman of the Cabinet of Ministers of the Kyrgyz Republic. Ms. Rebecca Grenspan, Secretary General of the UNCTAD. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good morning. It's my great privilege to welcome you to the opening ceremony of the 23 UNCTAD World Investment Forum, hosted by the United Arab Emirates. Please be advised that this opening ceremony will be immediately followed by the Global Leaders Investment Summit. My name is Amira Mohammed, and I have the honor to serve as the Master of Ceremonies for this opening. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we will proceed with a short video about the World Investment Forum, followed by the opening remarks from the Secretary General of UNCTAD.
The heart of Abu Dhabi, a gathering like no other unfolds. Here, in the land of opportunity, innovation, and progress, we come together under a shared vision, a shared hope. In the UNCTAD World Investment Forum, partnerships blossom and policies take shape. With over 150 events, the voices of 8,000 stakeholders echo, reaching leaders and representatives from over 160 countries. Together, we engage with state leaders, policymakers, business leaders, and partnerships with over 80 international organizations. The urgency is palpable as the world calls for investment stakeholders worldwide to ignite action. The UNCTAD World Investment Forum is a beacon guiding us towards green growth, climate action, clean energy, healthcare, and food security. The ripples of our actions here will boost investment in sustainable development and contribute to UN summits. Here at the UNCTAD World Investment Forum, we sow the seeds of global change. In Abu Dhabi, we unite for a brighter, more sustainable future. Welcome to Monumental Change. Welcome to the UNCTAD World Investment Forum.
And now, Ms. Rebecca Grenspan, you have the floor.
His Highness Sheikh Khaled bin Mohammed Al Nahyan, Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi and Chairman of the Abu Dhabi Executive Council, His Highness Sheikh Maktoum bin Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Deputy Ruler of Dubai, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, His Excellency Dr. Thani bin Ahmad Al Saudi, and His Excellency Chairman of Abu Dhabi Department of Economic Development, His Excellency Mr. José Ramos Horta, President of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste and Nobel Laureate, Mr. Faure Esozima Sambe, President of the Republic of Togo, Mr. Alkebek Zaparov, Chairman of the Cabinet of Ministers of the Kyrgyz Republic, Honorable Manoa Sedu Kamikamika, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Trade, Cooperative, Small and Medium Enterprises and Communications, Republic of Fiji, Excellencies, dear Resident Coordinator of the UN and colleagues of the UN system, distinguished delegates and speakers, ladies and gentlemen, I am truly humbled to stand before you today at this opening summit of the World Investment Forum 2023, a global platform where you, leaders of government and businesses, experts and stakeholders, converge to address the critical nexus between investment and sustainable development. Abu Dhabi provides an ideal backdrop for our discussions with its forward-thinking policies, modern infrastructure, and strategic location. UAE serves as a beacon of progress in the region and beyond. This dynamic city is a testament to the power of visionary leadership. I wish to express my profound gratitude to the government of the UAE for their warm hospitality and invaluable collaboration in hosting this event. We are honored to be their guests in this remarkable city. Dear friends, as we gather here today, millions of people are suffering. Cascading economic shocks, COVID-19, unrelenting climate disasters, war, geopolitics, and unbearable debt burdens are crashing the very fabric of our global society. The common agenda we draft together in 2015 in the belief that our destiny is shared and our humanity is one are in peril. Only 50% of the Sustainable Development Goals are on target to be met by 2030. The investment gap to meet them in the developing countries is growing from $2.5 trillion per year in 2015 to $4 trillion today. The SDGs are simply too big to fail. They are much more than just a set of targets. They are our common agenda in a world that is more polarized than ever, a world in desperate need of solidarity, fraternity, and multilateralism. What we see around us is a reminder of what is at stake when we lose sight of the long term, when we leave people behind, when we each go our own way. What we see today is only a taste of what the world could look like in 2030 if we fail the SDGs. That is what is at the center of the World Investment Forum. So, ladies and gentlemen, in the coming days, in this forum, we will discuss ways to close the SDG investment gap, to mobilize sustainable finance in global capital markets, to make sure that sustainable finance does what it promises by working on sustainability standards, to channel more of the funds raised to where they are needed most, to developing countries, to the least developed countries, the landlocked and small island developing states, to support investment in key SDG sectors, food security, health, sustainable infrastructure, energy transition, and climate mitigation and adaptation. It is a daunting agenda, but above all, it's a possible agenda if we can build trust and commitment between us. Because we need all of you, the private and public sectors, policymakers from all over the world, business leaders from all sectors, finance and investment experts, the young and the women in this room, and the United Nations system to think outside the box and design a positive agenda, learning from so many good solutions that need to be put in practice at scale. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, the world has given us so many examples of all we can achieve together. The technological breakthroughs we have seen in the first 2 decades of this century are breathtaking. The weight of responsibility is immense, but so are the opportunities. Together with determination, creativity, and solidarity, we can uphold our promise to future generations and pave the way forward. We do not need to look elsewhere for the solutions we seek. These solutions are here in this forum. They are here in the people sitting all around you. Let's make the World Investment Forum 2023 a turning point in our shared journey. Thank you.
Welcome to a land of opportunity, innovation, and progress. The United Arab Emirates, a nation that has transformed to a global powerhouse of innovation and prosperity in a few decades. The journey began with a vision set forth by the founding father, the late Sheikh Zayed, who imparted the power of perseverance and collaboration. Today, that vision is a reality, with GDP and foreign direct investment reaching new heights. The journey to sustainable development does not stop there. The UAE has become a global hub for investment, innovation, and trade, attracting quality foreign direct investment and reaching over $600 billion in non-oil foreign trade. At the heart of their transformation are the women of the UAE, leaders, entrepreneurs, and diplomats. They are the backbone of the nation, contributing significantly to its development. As they look to the future, the path is clear. We, the UAE 2031, is the next chapter, aiming to double the GDP, further boost the non-oil sectors, and cement its position as a global destination for talents, business, investment, and tourism. Abu Dhabi, the capital, is the cornerstone of this vision. It's not just an emirate, it's a testament to what can be achieved with determination, innovation, and strategic planning. And so, as attendees gather here for the 8th World Investment Forum, the UAE is not just celebrating the achievements. The country is looking to the future, exploring ideas that transcend boundaries, industries, and expectations. Together, the UAE people are shaping a shared future, leaning into sustainability and harnessing the latest techniques that define the globe. Let everyone draw inspiration from the story of the UAE, where challenges are met with innovation and collaboration. Let's invest in sustainable development. Welcome to the 8th edition of the World Investment Forum.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, may I now invite His Excellency, Mr. Ahmed Jassim Al-Zaabi, Chairman of the Abu Dhabi Department of Economic Development, to give the opening statement on behalf of the host country, the United Arab Emirates. Your Excellency, Mr. Al-Zaabi.
Your Highnesses, distinguished guests, welcome to Abu Dhabi, the capital of the United Arab Emirates. We are proud to partner with the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development to host the World Investment Forum, as we unite with a common goal to foster collaboration, strengthen economic partnership, and tackle the pressing global challenges of our era. Our conversations today to address challenges and develop solutions for priority issues in global investment and trade. Will feed into negotiations at the COP28 scheduled for late November here in the UAE. And there could be no location more fitting for this event than here in the United Arab Emirates, an economy that is going through rapid transformation in 3 key areas. The UAE is transforming into a highly diversified and growing non-oil economy. The UAE is transforming into a globally connected economy with strong international trade. And last but not least, the UAE is transforming into an increasingly sustainable and renewable energy-based economy. Looking ahead, the UAE's dedication to building bridges between nations and fostering economic relationships is set to unlock a world of opportunities. Our visionary leaders have mapped out strategic policies and incentives that propel us towards our ambitious goal of doubling our GDP by 2030. Turning to our growing strength in FDI, the UAE has successfully enticed a staggering $23 billion in 2022. This incredible figure marks a new record with the highest ever recorded FDI amount and a significant 10% surge from the previous year. As a result, the UAE has leaped 6 places in the global FDI rankings to become a major global player, 16th in the world. The UAE is now the world's 4th largest recipient of greenfield projects, with nearly 1,000 ambitious ventures announced last year, an 84% increase. This impressive growth shows the trust of the global community in our country's strong fundamentals and positive outlook, with over 170 countries choosing to invest, grow, and expand in the UAE over the past decade. The UAE is also one of the world's most active nations investing overseas, helping growth across 122 countries and 35 diverse sectors over the past 5 years alone. In 2022, our FDI outflows increased by 10% to reach $25 billion. The UAE moved up 5 places to 15th globally in 2021, reaffirming our role as a global leader of investments that help other countries to grow and prosper. As a global hub for business and finance, the UAE has also made bilateral trade agreements, cementing our reputation as a reliable partner for international trade and cooperation. Let me turn to our increasingly important role as a sustainable economy. The UAE was one of the first countries to commit to net zero by 2050, and as we prepare to host COP28, we have been clear on the urgent need for actions, with industry playing their full part in finding solutions to face global climate and energy challenges. Walking the talk, our commitment to sustainable development is clearly demonstrated by substantial investments of nearly $45 billion in renewable energy. In 2022 alone, the UAE FDI outflows dedicated nearly $36 billion to renewable energy projects. Actions speak louder. Last July, the UAE committed $54 billion to triple the contribution of renewable energy in the coming 7 years. The UAE has invested more than $40 billion over the last 15 years in clean and renewable energy sources. We plan to invest an additional $160 billion over the next 3 decades on the road to net zero. The Abu Dhabi Investment Authority has made substantial investments in over 40 gigawatts of renewable energy projects, enough capacity to power 17 million homes. Masdar, the Abu Dhabi Future Energy Company, is not only reshaping sustainability landscape in the UAE, it is an active investor in more than 40 countries, with a total value of over $30 billion. Distinguished guests, over the past 5 decades, we have emerged as a global leader in responsible conventional energy. And now, as we stride into the next 50 years, we are absolutely thrilled to unveil our unwavering commitment to spearheading the revolution in the next renewable energy revolution. The UAE proudly stands as a shining example of a nation that is spearheading the transition towards responsible energy sources. Join us as we shape the economy of tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We are delighted to have received the following message from the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, who could not join us due to other pressing matters. His message will be read by Mr. Pedro Moreno, Deputy Secretary General of UNCTAD.
The World Investment Forum meets at a critical time. Finance will make or break the Sustainable Development Goals, but the SDG financing gap is now a void, around $4 trillion a year. There is no lack of funds. Sustainable finance in global capital markets is booming, but the money is not getting to the countries where it is needed most. International investment in agriculture has stagnated. In renewables, it lags far behind the needs of developing countries. As a result, halfway to the 2030 deadline, the SDGs are dangerously off track. We need action now to get quality finance flowing, to put children in classrooms and food on tables, and to prevent climate catastrophe. The public and private sectors are both vital, and it is in the private sector's interest to play its part, because long-term profitability depends on sustainability. We need action from both public and private sectors to put my proposed SDG stimulus into effect and deliver $500 billion a year in affordable, long-term financing to developing countries. That includes multilateral development banks changing their business model and leveraging far more private finance at reasonable cost. I also urge governments to put a fair price on carbon and companies to implement credible net zero plans in line with the recommendations of my high-level expert group. The World Investment Forum can make a difference. Together, you can create policies, plans, and partnerships to boost finance and investment in the SDGs. The clock is ticking. I urge you to make this meeting count. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we bid farewell to their highnesses who have blessed us our opening ceremony with their presence. Please remain seated while they leave the hall. Thank you so much. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the opening ceremony of the 2023 World Investment Forum. Please remain seated since we proceed immediately with the Global Leaders Investment Summit after a few seating rearrangements. I'm now pleased to hand over the microphone to Mr. James Chan, Executive Director of the World Investment Forum and the Director of UNCTAD's Investment and Enterprise Division. James will be your Master of Ceremonies for the Global Leaders Investment Summit. James, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let's welcome the distinguished speakers coming to the podium to be seated here. Today, we have the honor of global leaders to this World Leaders Investment Summit of the World Investment Forum. May I now invite the Secretary General of UNCTAD, Ms. Rebecca Greenspan, to come to the podium. And also His Excellency, Mr. Jose Ramos Horta, President of the Democratic Republic of East Timor and Nobel laureate, to come to the podium. And also His Excellency, Mr. Holt Eso Simma Gnabinboy, the President of the Republic of Togo. His Excellency, Mr. Kilbek Zaporov, Chairman of the Cabinet of Ministers of the Kyrgyz Republic, and Mr. Ray Dalio, founder and CIO mentor of Bridgewater. Ms. Nandini Sukuma, Chief Executive Officer of the World Federation of Exchanges, and Mr. Martin Chunkong, Secretary General of Inter-Parliamentary Union. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, may I now first invite the UNCTAD Secretary General, Ms. Greenspan, to make her opening remarks. Secretary General, please.
Okay. Thank you. Dear President of the Democratic Republic of Timor-Leste, dear President of Togo, dear Head of the Council, Chairman of the Cabinet of Ministers of the Kyrgyz Republic, dear Martin of IPU, dear friend, thank you for being with us. Dear Mr. Dalio, thank you so much for being here with us too. And Mrs. Nandine Sukumar, Chief Executive Officer of the World Federation of Exchanges. Thank you for all of you for being with us here today. Excellencies, distinguished delegates and speakers, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me now to elaborate on the issue of investment, and in particular the big elephant in the room, the 4 trillion SDGs investment gap. If we want to save the SDGs, it is of first order importance that we close this gap. For that, we need you, but above all, we need to know what works and what doesn't. At UNCTAD, we have asked ourselves why the investment gap is growing. Our answer can be summarized in 4 words: risk, capacity, policy, and architecture. Allow me to say a few things about each. Risk. as you know, is perhaps the single most important metric for investment, as it drives interest rates and therefore capital costs. Risk perception is what made African interest rates be, listen to this number, 8 times those of Germany last year, and 3 to 4 times now as the hiking cycle continues. Most importantly, risk is what blocks most of the private wealth in the world, which is under custody in pension plans and investment funds, from flowing southwards. All of you here have fiduciary duties you are responsible for. And this all boils down to risk. But to deal with risk, we do not only need to mitigate it, and there are many ways we can do this, be it through onshore or offshore foreign exchange guarantees, or be it at the project level where several de-risking instruments have been developed, including by bringing government and the multilateral development banks in it. But to deal with risk, we also need to change our perception. Research by the UN has shown that African debts in the last 3 decades have been overpriced relative to the real level of risk and as inferred through actual default rates. To change our perception, we need to be more evidence-based, have more understanding of the local context, and ask from the credit rating agencies to look at their methodologies. The second factor is capacity. The absorption capacity and the capacity to prepare concrete investment projects. The fact of the matter is that part of the problem is that there is a scarcity of so-called shovel-ready projects at the supply side. This relates to institutional capacity, to investment promotion, and to the ease of doing business. There is much we can do here to help, and we at UNCTAD work very hard with many governments around the world to address this issue. But it is important to know that as climate and ESG-related standards and regulations keep growing, and with good reason, we must also consider what this means for the countries that need investment the most. A spaghetti ball of regulation, especially on trade, will only benefit those who can afford the most expensive lawyers. And ESG money needs to flow exactly to those who are at the front lines of development, those who are least able to afford them. The third factor is policy. An enabling policy framework, a clear investment facilitation strategy, together with a long-term vision and a capable public sector are still important ingredients for success. And lastly, we have the architectural issue. With respect to the international financial architecture, the truth is that the development finance system is currently too small to deal with the challenges at hand. I just came back from Marrakesh, where we had the IMF and World Bank annual meetings. The World Bank is a fifth of the size it was in the 60s relative to world GDP. The IMF can provide increased liquidity in a year what central banks of the reserve currencies can make available through QE in a day. The quota-based system is outdated and too often blames the victim in a world of global systemic shocks. And there is a broken pipe when it relates to debt, as we simply lack a multilateral mechanism to deal with it. And yet, we desperately need one. As interest rates rise and COVID-era debts mount, 3.3 billion people now live in countries that spend more on debt servicing than on either health or education. All of these issues are connected, As the multilateral development banks underinvest, there is no private capital to crowd into the big infrastructure projects the energy transition requires. And not enough project preparation at the supply side. As emergency liquidity is too often lacking, countries are forced into ever more expensive debts. As debts mount, they crowd out development spending and investment, and so the gap gets wider, and the money that is needed, indeed available, does not flow where it needs to flow. According to our latest calculation, the sustainable finance market, including ESG, green bonds, and so on, is now worth over $6 trillion. So there clearly is a will. What we need to find now is a way. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, throughout this forum, we will address each of these issues in detail, and alongside the biggest experts and most relevant stakeholders. I look forward to working alongside you and hearing your opinions and solutions to these critical questions. In closing, let me be clear about one thing. Inaction is a choice. There is more than enough wealth in this world to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. It is not about lacking resources. It's about priorities. As the Secretary General of the UN said, the clock is ticking, and what we cannot afford is to hesitate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary General Greenspan, for setting the scene for the summit session, highlighting the challenges and the policy directions for the Global Investment Forum and for our World Investment Forum. May I now have the honor to invite His Excellency, Mr. Ramos, Mr. Ramos Horta, the President of the Democratic Republic of East Timor, and the Nobel laureates for his opening statement. Your Excellency, please.
Your Highnesses, Excellencies, Heads of States, Heads of Government, Secretary General UNCTAD, Ministers, Ambassadors, Representatives of the Diplomatic Corps, international organizations. As we gather here today, I have to thank first UNCTAD for inviting me to share some brief remarks. First, I commend His Highness Sheikh President Mohammed bin Zayed, and through His Highness the whole leadership of UAE, past and present, for your exceptional leadership, vision, and policies that dramatically transform the Emirates from a sleepy fisherman village into an oasis of peace, tranquility, freedom, and fraternity, and all in only a few generations. I was a member of the International Independent Jury of the 2021-22 of Zayed Human Fraternity Award, internationally recognized award with the blessing of His Holiness Pope Francis, the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Cairo, Dr. Ahmad Tayyib, and His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed. Abu Dhabi, chosen by Pope Francisco and the Grand Imam as the location for the site of the Declaration on Human Fraternity, reflects UAE's deeply rooted values of peace and tolerance, and its long-standing humanitarian and the fraternity tradition. The two leaders believed they had to leave a humanitarian constitution for future generations, in which they underlined that religion is not, should not be, a cause of conflicts and wars. The two leaders co-signed the document in a partnership agreement, continuing to strive for a better world. The signature event on February 4, 2019 in Abu Dhabi was attended by more than 800 religious and spiritual leaders from different faiths. As soon as I was re-elected president of Timor-Leste in May 2022, I proposed to all our political leaders that this document be adopted as a national document and to be adapted into our school curriculum. This was unanimously agreed to. Excellencies, before continuing on the theme of this forum, I must say how shattered I am by the current situation in Gaza. The devastating outbreak of the war, the worst in decades, coming as the war in Ukraine rages on, exacerbates manifold the social and economic conditions of tens of millions of fellow human beings. We, Timorese, like many other leaders and peoples from across the world, know only too well the consequences of armed conflicts. We have the moral obligation to apply every dose of wisdom and patience in the search for justice and human dignity, independence, and security for Palestinians. They do have rights. They have the right to independence and sovereignty as Israelis do. Israel and neighbors should show the wisdom and courage of great peacemakers and the search for an end to this ignominious, endless, tragic situation of Palestinians without a home and without peace, and Israelis with a home but without peace. In Timor-Leste, we know that foreign direct investment is essential towards achieving our development goals. Transforming development challenges into investment opportunities is critical for the success of our vision of a country with a modern, diversified economy served by high-quality infrastructures, a growing, healthy, well-educated middle class by 2013. FDI is an engine of development, and we have a huge potential yet to be explored. With the strategic energy reserves, a sovereign fund currently valued at over $19 billion for a small population of 1.4 million, a fast-growing and largely untapped market for goods and services, with debt of only 13% of GDP, none of which out to commercial banks. All our debt minimum is out to Asian Development Bank, IFC, and the World Bank, none to commercial banks. We have every reason to be optimistic. Strategically located, we are making strenuous effort to become an active player in regional economy. We are about to become members of World Trade Organization, hopefully next year here in Abu Dhabi. We are also working round the clock towards full ASEAN membership by 2025. We are one of the safest countries in the world, free from structural violence, with very low criminality, zero political violence, zero religious-based or ethnic-based tensions or violence. We are rated a full democracy by The Economist and Freedom House. Reporters Without Borders ranked Timor-Leste 10th in the world in their 2023 Press Freedom Report. There is a long path ahead, but we have made sound progress regarding our overall development since independence in 2002. We know that to attract investors, development of essential sectors is key. Education a priority, as we know that a nation is worth the value of its human resources. Basic education in Timor-Leste is free and compulsory, and we are developing a network of polytechnic institutes and universities. We invest in healthcare to create a network of hospitals and clinics, boost training of doctors and health personnel. We are improving key infrastructure, road network being upgraded, electrical grid has seen improvements, now covering 96.1% of the country, to ensure reliable and uninterrupted supply throughout the country. Following a brotherly meeting with His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, I'm very optimistic that Timor-Leste and the UAE will partner in many areas, namely in renewable energy, green and blue economies. We are developing our commercial port, the state-of-the-art Tibar Bay Port, a 400 million PPP co-investment is now fully operational with a capacity of up to 1 million containers a year. We are currently in the process of expanding our main airport. We expect to be fully connected to the world through a submarine cable by next year and a fiber optic throughout the territory. We are endeavoring to diversify our economy, investing in the blue economy and in projects such as Tassimane gas field. This project aims to develop 3 industrial clusters, backbone of Timor-Leste energy industry. We have in place one of the most favorable legal framework in the world, aiming at attracting investors. Investors contributing to our economic growth will benefit from irresistible incentives. The government is prepared to sign special investor agreements with prospective investors that would grant them tax privileges and other incentives, including use of public land and the possibility of bringing qualified expatriates through a special visa regime. Our investment climate has improved with BEE measures introduced during the last years, including one window system and simplified procedures. We have signed investment protection agreements with countries such as Portugal, Germany, Qatar, and we are about to sign one with UAE. We are preparing to comply with WTO and ASEAN-related conditions to promote investment. We are aware that this journey will be a long and bumpy one, but we are sure that continuing on this path, we will realize the aspirations of our people, create a prosperous and strong nation, deliver prosperity and well-being in today's complex and rapidly changing world. I am confident the discussions and partnerships forged during this World Forum will pave the way for a more inclusive, more sustainable future for us all. Together, let us script a story of hope, resilience, and progress. Today, I'm here accompanied by our Deputy Prime Minister, Datu Seri Francisco Cabualdi Lai, and our Deputy Foreign Minister for ASEAN. I thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, the President of East Timor. May I now have the honor to invite His Excellency, Mr. Esosinma Glasonbe, the President of Togo, to make his statement. Your Excellency, please.
Altesse, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres, Madame la secrétaire générale de la CNUSED, Mesdames et Messieurs les présidents des organisations internationales, Mesdames et Messieurs les dirigeants d'entreprise, distingués invités, je voudrais à l'entame de mon propos vous remercier, Madame la secrétaire générale de la CNUSED, pour l'invitation qui nous a été adressée et qui nous honore, et aussi remercier les autorités des Émirats arabes unis pour l'accueil qui nous a été réservé et pour l'hospitalité qui nous est offerte. Madame la secrétaire générale de la CNUSED, vous avez planté le décor d'un besoin d'un investissement de 2 500 milliards de dollars en 2014 pour les pays en voie de développement. Nous sommes passés aujourd'hui à un déficit de 4 000 milliards de dollars. C'est donc un premier constat qu'il y a une extrême urgence, car sans centrale, sans route, sans système de santé, sans écoles ni universités, sans électrification, sans accès à l'eau potable, nous ne pourrons bâtir des sociétés prospères, des économies résilientes et des nations souveraines. Cette urgence, l'investissement public, ne saurait y répondre seul. C'est une rupture majeure. Traditionnellement, c'est au pouvoir public que revenait la responsabilité des investissements publics. En Afrique subsaharienne, la Banque mondiale estime que 95% des investissements dans les infrastructures sont ainsi réalisés par l'État ou les entreprises parapubliques. Mais les crises qui se multiplient depuis 2019 ont progressivement réduit notre marge de manœuvre budgétaire qu'il s'agit aujourd'hui de préserver. Or, à court terme, l'inflation qui tarde à retomber laisse peu d'espoir sur un assouplissement des politiques monétaires et un desserrement des contraintes de financement. Je salue donc l'accent mis depuis l'initiative Billions to Trillions de 2015 sur l'implication du secteur privé dans les investissements en faveur des objectifs de développement durable. Cependant, force est de constater que la participation du secteur privé n'a pas été à la hauteur de nos attentes. En 2022, les investissements directs à l'étranger ont même chuté de 16% dans les pays les moins avancés. Je vois trois raisons derrière ce manque de progrès. La volatilité constatée ces dernières années accentue le besoin d'une politique de de-risking, car face à l'instabilité des cours de certaines denrées et de nombreuses devises, le secteur privé se désengage. Les opportunités d'investissement dans les pays en développement sont souvent trop méconnues, les investisseurs se plaignant d'un manque de projets bancables. Et même lorsque les investissements privés se matérialisent, l'effet de levier reste parfois trop maigre. Selon l'Overseas Development Institute, en moyenne, $1 d'argent public investi dans les infrastructures d'un pays en développement n'attirait que 30 centimes d'argent privé. Pour venir à bout de ces difficultés, nous devons à court terme redoubler d'efforts en faveur du de-risking. Nos partenaires techniques et financiers doivent nous accompagner dans l'accès au financement et la mise en place d'outils innovants, ne se limitant plus à des exonérations fiscales. Mesdames et Messieurs, le cœur de mon propos aujourd'hui concerne le moyen terme et le rôle de l'État que j'appellerai stratège. C'est le travail de fond sur le rôle de l'État qui, à l'horizon 2030, nous permettra de pleinement réaliser les ambitions d'investissement qu'incarnent les partenariats publics-privés. Pour le secteur privé, s'allier à un État stratège constitue un pari gagnant, car l'État stratège fait trois grandes promesses aux investisseurs qui acceptent de s'engager à ses côtés. La promesse tout d'abord d'une vision globale et cohérente des opportunités bancables. C'est d'ailleurs ce besoin de politique cohérente et visionnaire qui nous a très tôt convaincus au Togo de l'importance de faire de notre pays un hub logistique. Le Togo possède le port naturellement le plus profond de la sous-région ouest-africaine. Pays qui a la forme d'un corridor, il a vocation à s'imposer en hub logistique visant la desserte de l'Hinterland notamment. C'est cette vision de long terme qui a permis l'avènement d'un partenariat fructueux avec le secteur privé pour le développement d'une plateforme industrielle dans la banlieue de Lomé, la capitale. C'est donc la vision cohérente d'un État stratège qui a montré la voie à nos partenaires et investisseurs. Fort de cette expérience dans la logistique, nous avons pu asseoir plus largement le rôle d'un État visionnaire et cohérent. À cet effet, la feuille de route du gouvernement togolais se veut à la fois un fil conducteur, mais aussi une banque de projets intéressants pour les investisseurs. La promesse ensuite d'une compétition saine. Sachons tirer les conclusions des privatisations hâtives des années 90. Je suis convaincu que réguler, c'est avant tout protéger l'intérêt des opérateurs et des consommateurs. Défendre l'État stratège, c'est défendre l'importance d'institutions fortes et protectrices des marchés. La promesse enfin de la stabilité. Depuis 10 ans, les conflits se multiplient en Afrique à mesure que s'éloigne l'espoir des dividendes de la paix. Nos armées s'engagent au quotidien pour l'intégrité des territoires, pour la sûreté de nos côtes et la cohésion nationale. Un gage de paix et de stabilité placé au cœur de la feuille de route de mon gouvernement. Vous l'aurez compris, dans un monde en transition, l'État retrouve sa juste place et ces 3 promesses, nous les tiendrons. Je me réjouis donc de constater, depuis la Covid-19 et plus encore ces derniers mois, le retour en grâce de l'État stratège dans les pays développés. La planification industrielle, longtemps décriée, fait l'objet d'un nouveau consensus que j'estime salutaire. J'invite nos partenaires techniques et financiers à rentrer avec nous dans cette nouvelle ère. Je les encourage en particulier à défendre à nos côtés les capacités budgétaires de nos États à jouer leur rôle de stratège. L'urgence climatique, la recomposition des chaînes de valeur et l'avènement de la zone de libre-échange continentale africaine nous placent aujourd'hui à un moment charnière. Je souhaite que cette vision d'un État stratège éclaire nos délibérations. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, the President of the Republic of Togo. Now I have the pleasure to invite His Excellency, Mr. Akibek Zaparov, Chairman of the Cabinet of Ministers of Turkish Republic. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Ваше Высочество, вице-президент, премьер-министр Объединенных Арабских Эмиратов, шейх Мохаммед бен Рашид Аль-Мактум, Ваше Превосходительство, госпожа Ребекка Гринспен, генеральный секретарь ЮНКТАД, уважаемые участники форума, дамы и господа. Прежде всего, я хочу поблагодарить Объединенные Арабские Эмираты и конференцию ООН по торговле и развитию за прекрасную организацию 8-го Всемирного инвестиционного форума, за традиционное гостеприимство теплый прием и радушие. Всемирный инвестиционный форум давно состоялся как авторитетная международная площадка по вопросам продвижения инвестиций и стимулирования деловой активности. Для меня, как представителя горной страны в самом сердце Евразийского континента, большая честь поделиться своими мнениями с высокой аудиторией. Важно, что созвездие высоких участников, включая руководителей государств, политиков, профессионалов, проведет глубокий и содержательный обмен мнениями. Как гласит арабская пословица, в плохом много хорошего. Ведь даже из самых сложных проблем можно извлечь полезные уроки. Хочу также отметить востребованность этой глобальной площадки, которая впервые собралась со времен глобального кризиса 2008 года. С тех пор менялась тематика дискуссий, но неизменным оставались благородные цели и задачи, как передовые достижения и наилучшие практики сделать достоянием для всех членов международного сообщества. Здесь хочу процитировать основателя и первого президента Объединенных Арабских Эмиратов шейха Заида ибн Султана ибн Заида ибн Халифа аль-Нахаяна, который, придя к власти, сделал программное заявление. Если Аллах облагодетельствовал нас своими дарами, то первое, что мы должны сделать в угоду и благодарность Ему, направить богатство на преобразование страны и творение добро народу. Весь мир свидетель тех эпохальных преобразований, которые изменили вашу прекрасную страну, и всех мудрых решений, которые были приняты в непростые времена этим выдающимся правителем. Уважаемые участники форума, сегодня, ощущая все сильные, турбулентные потрясения мировой политики, мало кто помнит, что более 30 лет назад блестящий дипломат и политик из Египта, тогдашний генеральный секретарь Организации Объединенных Наций Бутрос Гали выдвинул повестку дня для мира, в которой попытался обобщить трудный опыт послевоенного периода и дать предложения по устройству мира на более справедливых началах. Тогда же он отметил первым феномен глобализации и фрагментации как движущихся сил той бурной эпохи. Разве мир тогда и сейчас сильно отличается для всех нас? Кто был свидетелем распада биполярной системы мироустройства? 30 лет назад возник и набирал силу процесс, известный как глобализация. Некоторые даже провозгласили конец истории, как подтверждение итогов и последствий исчезновения одной из опор тогдашнего мира. В наши же дни, особенно приходя в себя после потрясений от коронавирусной пандемии, когда весь мир в течение длительного периода практически сидел в заперти, с тревогой наблюдаем за термином деглобализация. Мы видим, как постепенно целые регионы и субрегионы мира движутся в сторону обособления. Причем следует подчеркнуть, что когда высказывается аргумент относительно деглобализации, то используются два главных аргумента. Первое, транспортные расходы перестали снижаться. Второе, затраты на рабочую силу неуклонно растут. Но это неверно. Разве в новинку проявившиеся сейчас процессы возникновения новых субъектов международного права, непрекращающиеся межэтнические, межконфессиональные, межобщинные противоречия, конфликты и кризисы? В этом контексте хочу отметить актуальность темы нашей дискуссии «Долгосрочные решения для множественных кризисов». Сложность тематики соразмерна совокупности обостряющихся проблем и противоречий, затрагивающих практически все сферы жизнедеятельности, личности, общества и государства. Как я отметил выше, и 30 лет назад, и сейчас мировое сообщество стоит перед необходимостью осмысления пройденного пути, выявления критически важных проблем, которые мешают идти вперед, и определения первоочередных шагов. Самой важной проблемой современного мира является на сегодня кризис доверия. Тревожно наблюдать, как вместо сотрудничества идет соперничество, вместо взаимодействия – меры принуждения, включая санкционное давление и нерыночные методы воздействия. Опасно то, что сами основы международного мироустройства начинают рушиться из-за углубления недоверия, прежде всего, между главными субъектами мировой политики и экономики, на которых, в соответствии с уставом ООН, лежит особая ответственность и особая роль поддержания мира и безопасности, создания благоприятных условий для развития. В чем опасность текущей ситуации? Если в биполярную эпоху были четко признаны и соблюдались нормы и принципы сосуществования, то сейчас видны попытки решения множественных проблем за счет других. Совет тут только один – добросовестное соблюдение норм и принципов международного права, стремление вести политику и предпринимать действия, учитывающие интересы друг друга. Дорогие друзья, идеи и принципы повестки дня для развития, которая позднее трансформировалась в 17 целей устойчивого развития, самое важное направление совместной деятельности международного сообщества. Цели устойчивого развития ООН являются основой государственной политики нашей страны и инкорпорированы в долгосрочную национальную стратегию развития Кыргызстана. Согласно докладу ООН по устойчивому развитию, Кыргызстан занял 45-е место из 166 государств-членов ООН. Президентом Кыргызской республики Садыром Джапаровым поставлена задача войти в число 30 лучших стран по достижению целей устойчивого развития к 2030 году. Наибольший упор вместе с нашими международными партнерами делаем на реализацию цели номер 4 – качественное образование, номер 7 – недорогая и чистая энергия, номер 12 – ответственное потребление и производство и номер 13 – борьба с изменением климата. В Центральноазиатском регионе Кыргызстан обладает огромным потенциалом развития чистой гидроэнергетики и рынками сбыта в Китае и в Южной Азии. В настоящее время мы используем всего лишь 13% от имеющихся возможностей. Перспектива данной отрасли определяет огромные экспортные возможности, а также обеспечение топливно-энергетического баланса в регионе и за его пределами. Мы хотим войти в число крупных мировых поставщиков чистой энергетики за счет внедрения передовых технологий производства. Климатические особенности страны предполагают также развитие и эффективное использование солнечной и ветровой энергии. Кыргызстан заинтересован в дальнейшем наращивании сотрудничества в сфере инвестиций в энергетический сектор, строительство крупных и малых ГЭС, развитие возобновляемых источников энергии. Уважаемые участники форума, мы убеждены, что устойчивое развитие – это не одиночный путь, а коллективное дело. Мы намерены работать рука об руку с международным сообществом для решения глобальных проблем и использования возможностей для роста. В заключение хотел бы отметить, что привлечение зарубежных инвестиций и создание благоприятного инвестиционного климата является ключевым приоритетом экономической политики Кыргызстана. Мы призываем международных партнеров инвестировать в Кыргызстан. Благодарю за внимание.
Thank you, Your Excellency, the Chairman of the Council of Ministers of Kyrgyz Republic. Now we have the honor to present the video message of His Excellency Denis Francis, the President of the 78th General Assembly of the United Nations. The video message.
Your Excellencies, the heads of state and government, UNCTAD Secretary General, Ms. Rebecca Greenspan, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies. It is my pleasure to address the 8th World Investment Forum, and I applaud its focus on the critical need to invest in sustainability. Today, over 800 million people live in extreme poverty. 2.4 billion people are facing acute food insecurity, and an astounding 59 countries are experiencing a debt crisis, spending more on debt servicing than on education, health, and other essential social services. At the midpoint of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, we are confronted by the need to rapidly reverse underperformance. Paramount among them is the dramatic scaling up of financing to achieve the SDGs. The shortfalls are most glaring for developing countries, which face a staggering $4 trillion annual SDG financing gap. Excellencies, we know that the funds to finance the SDGs exist. The value of the sustainable finance market, green bonds, social bonds, and ESG funds has grown significantly in recent years to a total of nearly $6 trillion. And yet more than 30 of the developing countries have yet to attract a single large renewable energy project since the landmark adoption of the Paris Agreement in 2015. We simply must do more to flip the dominant paradigm. Closing the gap is not simply about providing resources. It is about enhancing productive capacities, especially for countries in special situations, the least developed countries, the landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states. It is also about creating opportunities for education and advancing gender equality so that women and men, placed on equal footing, can harness the benefits of the growth in value chains, the rise in digital trade, and equally benefit from the digital transformation.
Thank you, His Excellency, for the video message. Now we have heard the policymakers' perspective. We now move on to the business perspective. First, I have the pleasure to invite Mr. Ray Dalio, the founder and CIO mentor of the Bridgewater.
Thank you very much. Before I share my thoughts about the issues that this session is intended to address, I want to thank all of those at the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, especially Secretary General Rebecca Greenspan, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, His Highness Sheikh Khalid bin Mohammed bin Zayed, His Highness Sheikh Maktoum bin Mohammed bin Rashid, and His Excellency Ahmed Al-Zabi, as well as many others who brought this session together. We're now at the Global Leaders Investment Summit, which is the most important part of the World Investment Forum. It's the most important part of the forum because the issues that we are now going to try to deal with are beyond the reach of investors who are simply trying to make money on their investments. The explicitly stated purpose of this Leaders Summit is to have a debate that shines light on how to direct investment resources to reduce today's multiple crises, including food security, the energy transition, health systems, supply chain resilience, and productive capacity growth in the poorest countries. This Leaders Summit is for those at the highest policy-making levels to brainstorm and learn to shape policies that will achieve these goals. Obviously, to successfully deal with these problems, we must look at the world objectively, to see the real conditions, especially those of the key players. We must know and acknowledge their circumstances and their real motivations. And we must be realistic of how the world really works and how changes really happen. In other words, we have to be hyper-realistic, and we have to help those who have their hands on the levers of power to work well together to produce a better world rather than to fight destructively with each other, which makes the whole world much worse. So what does the world now really look like? Naturally, I, like all people, see it through my lens that is colored by my experiences. As a global macro investor for over 50 years, my job has been to anticipate how the world will change and to bet on it. Over that time, I've learned that most things that surprised me because they hadn't happened in my lifetime, but they happened many times in history. For these reasons, when big, unusual circumstances come along, I study analogous past cases in history. That studying led me to see that now there are 5 big forces driving most everything. And throughout history, the same 5 big forces drove history, and they transpire in big cycles that typically last 100 years or give or take. These forces are the debt, money, economic force that makes people wealthy and poor. These internal peace conflict force that happens within countries, that is good when people work well together and is bad when they fight with each other, typically over wealth, power, and values. The external peace conflict force that shapes how the world order works, which is based on which countries have the money and power to determine how the world order works. Fourth, forceful acts of nature, especially droughts, floods, and pandemics. And fifth, changes in man's knowledge and technology. To me, these were always the main drivers, and we are now in the part of the cycle that is on the brink of one of those classic big changes and conflict periods that dramatically changes the world order, like the 1930 to 45 period and the 1905 to 1920 period. It appears to me that these 5 forces will likely unfold in ways that will make the next 5 to 10 years even more challenging than they are now. Obviously, to deal with these issues at hand will take a lot of money and a lot of efficiency, a lot of which have to come from the developed world. Yet the developed world governments don't have enough money because they are financially constrained and the financial costs are too great. The developed world accounts for just 15% of the world population. Its governments materially helping 85% of the world's population outside its borders is unrealistic. We can expect that the developed world's governments to take on the burden of taking care of the rest of the world. I should say that again. We cannot expect the developed world's governments to take on the burden of taking care of the developed world. It just won't happen in the scale that's needed. The world's developed countries are deeply in debt and needing to rapidly, I'm speaking about the developed countries, that they are deeply in debt and needing to rapidly get deeper in debt to sustain themselves, and those get deeper in debt to sustain themselves, and those who are lending to them are pulling back. At this time, they are also fighting among themselves about wealth and power and how that should be divided. Also at this time, the leading powers, especially the United States and China, are at odds about what the world order will look like, and their conflicts with each other are bringing them to the brink of war. You can see countries lining up into 2 opposing sides, while other countries are striving to remain neutral and out of conflict. As you know very well, as a result of the risk of war and being cut off by it, self-security is being prioritized over efficiency, which creates supply line disruptions and possibly much bigger problems. As regard acts of nature, most importantly, we have a climate change that will be enormously costly, whether we deal with it well or not. It's estimated that the cost will be between 5 and 10 trillion a year in a world that produces an annual GDP of 100 trillion. So it alone will cost 5 to 10% of GDP annually. For these reasons, the leaders in these most formally rich countries don't have enough money to take care of the constituents that elect them, let alone the much more that is required to adequately take care of the world's poor who are struggling. Also, the assets are of all multilateral development banks combined, including the World Bank, and all regional development banks are only about $2 trillion, which is essentially nothing in relation to the size of the challenge. The big money is in the hands of companies and investors. There's about $200 trillion in liquid markets and another $200 trillion in assets of private illiquid markets. The investors behind them are looking for good returns and are not looking to give away money because they have their own constituents to take care of. Given this picture of the world's circumstances and how it works, I believe that to be successful, global leaders must do two things. They must keep the peace, and they must facilitate symbiotic financial and economic relationships between those who have the money and those who need it. I won't tell them how to keep the peace because that's not where my expertise is. But I can tell them who has what amount of money and what their motivations are. Most importantly, I can tell them about the world's biggest investors. As an investor who knows a number of these developing countries, sees the great resources that many developing countries have, which are needed for world progress, sees a number of new technologies that are being designed to reduce the problems that we are concerned with, and knows most institutional investors in the world, I want to make clear that I see real synergies that can come from investing together through mutually profitable investors. I believe that multi-development banks and commercial banks working like investment banks work with highly effective interactions to do deals, commercial deals, will improve significantly over the next 5 to 10 years. I hope more immediately. I believe that this is the only way to provide adequate resources that will be invested in the areas that were needed to achieve the goals, and I believe that this can happen. As for those who cannot be competitive, those countries that cannot be competitive, regional and global supports will have to be relied on. I think that if we do it together in a mutually supportive and what we call profitable way, but let's say economic way that benefits most people, I think that's our only chance of dealing with this very large problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ray Dalio, for your insights of the global investors community. May I now have the pleasure to invite Ms. Nandini Sukumo, the CEO of the World Federation of Exchanges, for her statement.
Madam Greenspan, Director Dan, our gracious hosts in Abu Dhabi, Your Excellencies and distinguished fellow speakers, it's an honor to join you here at the World Investment Forum 2023, representing the role of capital markets and cross-border investment, and speaking a little bit about the role of capital markets in fostering a more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient world. We have grown accustomed to thinking and speaking of what the pandemic taught us. But in reality, the years that have followed, they have been short years, but busy years, have been filled with geopolitical strife, much of which is unexpected, with natural disasters, which are always unexpected, and with financial crises, which are rarely unexpected and often and normally foreshadowed by many warnings. The good news, however, is that capital markets are inherently inclusive, sustainable, and resilient due to their very nature and composition. And the events of the last 5 years, because it was in Geneva in 2018 that we all met in person at the forum, have heralded a turning point. Everyone recognizes now the need to seek a more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient system rather than merely just the majority. During the first half of 2023, to give you some data, markets continued to be subject to various geopolitical and economic tensions that have hampered the expectations of a quicker economic recovery. In addition to the effects of the war in Ukraine, we saw the failure of some banks in Europe and in the US, which at some point raised fears of financial institutions running into difficulty at a larger scale. And that's in addition to the reverberations from the crypto world triggered by the ongoing failure of FTX. The persistent inflation has forced central banks to continue tightening their monetary policy. In turn, the increase in interest rates has put pressure on share prices, an inclusive measure of investment. WFE data for the first half of 2023 reflected how these tensions have affected markets. We saw a decrease in the global number of IPOs and in investment flows, which respectively fell 27% and 54% when comparing them to the same period a year ago. Only a few markets, notably in the US, offered a positive trend. In a similar way, trading activity, especially in the equities market, cash equities, decreased across regions, reflecting lesser interest in participating in markets. On the other hand, the need for managing the risks and the uncertainty derived from interest rate hikes, the geopolitical landscape, and the fear of inflation are consistent with a trend that we have begun to see in exchange-traded markets, that of an increase in volumes of interest rate and commodity derivatives. Now turning more specifically to the matter at hand, capital market participants globally are embracing the interest in green investment. This is now a fast-growing industry. Madam Greenspan gave us a number, 6 trillion. And I commend UNCTAD, before we go any further, on the leadership that they have shown in this regard. I believe later today, even, we are recognizing together as a community innovation in some of the green funds. The momentum in green investments will continue. There are numerous capital market initiatives in the space where participants are coming together to address existing challenges and crystallize solutions. For example, exchanges worldwide have agreed a set of key principles to define what green equities should look like. I suggest all of you look at it. The bond market, the fixed income market, has come together as well, in many cases under the ICMA green bond principles, to do the same. Public markets, which I speak for, equity, debt, derivatives, and commodity, are not only key vectors in financing the transition and financing the net zero world we aspire to, but should also be recognized as the best vehicle for such investments. By their nature, public markets are intrinsically sustainable and inclusive. The crucial values of accountability, good disclosure, and governance and investor protection sit at the heart of the exchange model. Public markets are deeply inclusive. They allow companies listed on their markets to raise capital, and investors, especially retail investors, to buy and sell securities, knowing that their interests will be protected in a regulated environment. There is a reason that every capital market plan in every jurisdiction, emerging, frontier, and developed, has an exchange in the toolkit. I would like to reflect briefly on a key theme that is currently running through capital market conversations: the interconnected and complementary nature and relationship between private and public markets. The two are intertwined, and both need the other. Private markets are often the start of a company's journey to adulthood, and listing on an exchange, moving from the private to the public market, is a milestone in that journey, as that's where a company drives and begins to drive inclusive growth. Often, listing would not occur without the foundation that private markets have given that company. But in looking at the balance between the two, especially the incentives to use either of the markets, at the moment that balance is not correctly calibrated. And this means we will not see the outcomes that we collectively seek if this problem remains unaddressed. If government and policy weight the incentives in such a way that private markets grow increasingly more attractive due to lower requirements for governance and disclosure, for example, we will encourage companies, issuers, to stay there indefinitely. This is bad for governance and transparency, and that we require both strong governance, good transparency, for a resilient, well-functioning financial system that can withstand shocks, and this is bad for the investor, both the man or woman on the street and the institutional investor. And we will never solve for problems such as climate or gender equality if the legislation and policies focus only on companies listed in public markets or on securities that trade on such public markets. In Europe, which has gotten it right in this case, the threshold for disclosure and higher governance is not whether a company is listed or not. It's rather size. This is the right approach. We need better, greater disclosure from private markets and greater transparency and accountability in private markets. If nothing else has taught us this, the ongoing issues in the crypto market have demonstrated this vividly. I want to conclude here, and it is a call to arms and a message of hope, though. All of us in this room are united in our desire, in our common goal, which is to build a sustainable, resilient, equitable future. UNCTAD has led from the front on this. For those of us in this room, we believe that finance, trade, the investment industry, of which capital markets are major players, are key to this. Together, as colleagues and as a community, we can do that. We can achieve the outcomes we want if we can work side by side, advocating thoughtful policies, of which we all look forward to hearing many more in the days ahead, that seek the greatest good for all. Thank you, Madam Greenspan, Director Zahn, for your mission, for your leadership. We look forward, all of us, in this large meeting, I believe there are 5,000 people here, to working with you to achieve this common goal.
Thank you very much, Nandini, for sharing with us the insights of the capital market, including in investing in sustainable development. Now I have the honor to invite Mr. Martin Chung-Kong, the Secretary General of Inter-Parliamentary Union, to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Your Royal Highnesses, Excellencies present in the room, my good friend Rebecca Greenspan, Secretary General of UNCTAD. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to be with you here today. I wish to thank UNCTAD for inviting me to this very important gathering, and I want to commend you, Rebecca, and your colleagues on your leadership in convening such an important forum, and for giving the IPU the opportunity to provide the parliamentary perspective to the discussions here. And in this regard, let me first of all confess that I am not an expert on financial matters. I lead an organization, a political organization, the Interparliamentary Union, and I'm no expert in the discussions that are taking place here. But I come to these discussions from the perspective that whatever we have been discussing here ends up at the table of parliaments and parliamentarians worldwide for policies and laws to be devised so that we can, together as humanity, move forward. As I address you here, and as the Secretary General of the UN himself said in his video message, the SDGs that bring us here are in a bad way. They are off track, and some of the SDGs are actually moving in the opposite direction. So it is important that we take urgent action. And as we have heard from various speakers, it is not lack of resources that is the problem. To be clear, the global economy of $100 trillion is a lot of money that can be spent on the SDGs. And we do not even take into account the historically high levels of debt levels and the cost of ongoing crises such as food, such as climate change, and other crises that have been mentioned here. And so I share the view that the SDGs need an injection of trillions of dollars, but it is not entirely as if we must go somewhere to find this money. It is said that the money is available. The problem, as we see it, is a distributional problem, how resources are collected and spent, and the rules that govern investments within countries and globally. I want to use this opportunity today to make a strong pitch for public finance as a key source of development finance, and in the process, I hope to clear the air of some of the misconceptions about the relationship between public and private investments. Parliaments and parliamentarians, as I have said, are in the business of adopting laws, including the key budget bill, through which the whole fiscal framework of a country, revenues and expenditures combined, comes to life. It is through these instruments that public finance for development can and must be mobilized, beginning in the much richer developed countries. The SDG finance problem really begins on the revenue side of the ledger, meaning that not enough taxes are collected on the better off that can be channeled into national and international efforts for sustainable development. Tax systems in far too many countries around the world are too regressive, taking relatively more from the poor and the middle class than from the rich, particularly shareholders in highly profitable corporations. Absurdly, work, what most people do for a living, including myself, is taxed more than idle capital. Illicit capital flows continue virtually unabated. Financial transactions like the purchase of stocks and bonds or of foreign currency are either not taxed or taxed at a pittance compared to the VAT charged on goods and services. Highly profitable fossil fuel companies get tax breaks and direct subsidies that they do not need. The effective corporate tax rate, even if we go by the minimum of 15% agreed by the G20, is still quite low by historical comparisons. I do not have the time to cover the whole list of inequities built into tax systems across the world. My point is simply that they need to be fixed urgently, beginning in high-income countries where resources are greater and a lot of finance could be redirected to public investments at home and abroad. There would be more money for bilateral aid, to be sure, but also more money to boost the lending capacity of international development banks, more money for debt cancellations and restructuring, more money for financing special facilities to fight climate change, achieve universal health coverage, restore biodiversity, and so on and so forth. On the expenditure side, without doubt, governments need to rethink their priorities. As I mentioned earlier, fossil fuel companies or subsidies, but also other kinds of subsidies make no sense whatever and must be dramatically reduced, if not eliminated, with savings invested in the green economy. We're talking of hundreds of billions each year in fossil fuel subsidies alone, and that are not just a big throwaway, but that end up costing trillions of dollars down the line in terms of healthcare costs, environmental remediation, and lost economic opportunities. Another good illustration of expenditures to be reallocated, of course, is the global military budget, which has now reached the stratospheric amount of over $2 trillion. Over and above this simple math, there is a deeper change that needs to happen in the way public expenditures are perceived. That is as dead-end costs instead of the investments that they really are. All of the public goods that people need, from healthcare to education, public transport, infrastructure of all kinds, increase human well-being, but also have a very direct benefit to the economy as a whole. It is perhaps because of this fundamental misconception that in far too many countries, counterproductive austerity policies carry the day. Much has been said in recent years about de-risking and leveraging private investments through private-public partnerships and other kinds of government support. I have nothing against the idea per se, but let me remind you that at the end of the day, a more fundamental way to attract private investments is via investments in health, education, and all of the public goods that support work and skill development. For developing countries to go up the value chain and become less dependent on commodities, building on stable economies, investments in human capital and public goods are important, are more important than attracting foreign investors with tax breaks with few conditions attached. As far as PPP is proper, I can tell you that they are of concern in many parliaments for a number of reasons, which come down to a lack of transparency and accountability. Far too often, parliaments have only scant knowledge of PPP contracts that sound expedient at first, only to end up costing the public purse more in terms of revenue, loss, higher user fees, and increased liabilities. All of this happens when things go wrong. Last but not least, on this short list of misallocated expenditures, there is, of course, the cost of living, the cost of debt servicing. As UNCTAD reported recently, and Rebecca, you mentioned it in your statement a while ago, countries where a total of 3.3 billion people live are spending more in debt servicing than in health and education. Clearly, the solution here can't depend only on the debtor countries themselves, but on deep reforms in the international financial architecture. To start with, a new financial architecture would make it easier for countries to borrow in their own currencies on longer terms and at lower rates. It would set up a proper sovereign debt restructuring mechanism. It would enable the IMF to issue trillions of dollars in special drawing rights, and it would certainly allow for a much greater voice for developing countries as principal borrowers on the boards of the World Bank and IMF. In sum, what is most notable about these few ideas I have presented is that they all involve a simple act of political will. And I argue here before this audience that parliaments and parliamentarians are critical to forging and mobilizing that political will that takes us forward. We do not need to wait for new wealth to be produced or new money to be minted in our central banks. We can act now with the tools we have and the solutions that are quickly available, and with that, make a real difference to the implementation of the SDGs before it is really too late. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin Tunkong, the Secretary General of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, for sharing the perspective of the global lawmakers. This concludes the first summit of the World Investment Forum 2023, and we'll continue the summit session in the afternoon at 3:30. Thank you for participating in the morning session. See you in the afternoon.